My name is Adaora Okafor, and I'm writing this from my apartment in Brooklyn, where I've spent the weekend recovering from another family gathering where my own relatives made jokes about my dark skin, suggested I try skin bleaching products, and openly compared me unfavorably to my lighter-skinned sister Chioma, who they consistently praise as the pretty one in our family. At 26, I'm a successful elementary school teacher with a master's degree in education, but none of my professional achievements matter to family members who view my rich, dark skin as a source of shame rather than pride, and who have spent my entire life trying to convince me that I would be more beautiful, more valuable, and more worthy of love if I could somehow become lighter. The colorism in my Nigerian-American family began before I could even understand what it meant, starting with comments from relatives who would compare my dark complexion unfavorably to my sister's lighter skin tone when we were toddlers. Chioma, who is 18 months younger than me, inherited our father's lighter complexion and our maternal grandmother's more European-influenced features, while I inherited our mother's deeper melanin and broader Nigerian features that connected me more obviously to our African ancestry. From early childhood, these physical differences were treated not as natural variations in genetic expression, but as a hierarchy where lightness was inherently superior to darkness. My earliest memory of colorist discrimination within my own family occurred when I was 5 years old and my grandmother, who we called Mama Nena, was visiting from Lagos. During a family dinner, she looked at me and Chioma sitting side by side and announced to the adults at the table, "Chioma is so beautiful, she could marry anyone." But Adaora, she trailed off with a meaningful look that conveyed everything she couldn't say directly in front of children. Later that evening, I overheard her telling my mother that I would need to compensate for my appearance by being exceptionally intelligent or accomplished because my dark skin would limit my romantic and social opportunities. The skin bleaching pressure began in middle school when my changing hormones made my already dark complexion even deeper and more obviously African. My Aunt Ngozi, who had been using bleaching creams for years and had achieved a significantly lighter skin tone than her natural complexion, started bringing me products from beauty supply stores that promised to brighten and even out my skin tone. She would present these creams as gifts wrapped in loving concern about my future prospects, explaining that lighter skin would make me more attractive to potential romantic partners and help me succeed professionally in America, where European beauty standards still dominated most industries. The family pressure intensified during family photos and special occasions, where relatives would arrange us according to skin tone, with the lightest family members positioned prominently in front, while darker-skinned relatives were pushed toward the back or sides of group pictures. During my sweet 16th birthday party, my uncle Emeka made a speech about how both his nieces were beautiful, but spent 5 minutes describing Chioma's lovely light complexion and delicate features, while managing only a brief comment about my academic achievements and strong personality that felt more like consolation prizes for not being born lighter. The dating pressure reached its peak during high school when my family started expressing concern about my romantic prospects, with relatives openly worrying that boys wouldn't be interested in dating someone as dark as me. When I did have boyfriends who were attracted to my dark skin and African features, family members would make comments about how lucky I was that someone was willing to overlook my appearance, or suggest that these boys were probably using me temporarily until they could find lighter-skinned girlfriends for serious relationships. The academic pressure was also influenced by colorist thinking, with family members constantly emphasizing that I needed to be twice as smart and accomplished as lighter-skinned girls to compensate for what they viewed as the disadvantage of my appearance. While this motivation contributed to my academic success, it also created internalized beliefs that my worth was conditional on exceptional achievement because my natural appearance was inherently inferior and required compensation through other forms of excellence. The college years provided temporary relief from family colorism as I attended Howard University, where dark skin was celebrated and African features were viewed as beautiful rather than shameful. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who looked like me and who understood that beauty came in many different shades of black and brown. I thrived academically and socially, developing confidence in my appearance and my worth that had been systematically undermined throughout my childhood and adolescence. But the family dynamics remained unchanged during visits home, where relatives would comment on how confident I had become at college, as if self-acceptance was somehow surprising for someone with my appearance. They would ask whether I was dating anyone, and when I mentioned romantic relationships with classmates who appreciated my dark skin and African features, they would express surprise that I was able to attract partners without improving my appearance through bleaching or other interventions. The professional world presented its own forms of colorism that were more subtle than family discrimination, but equally damaging to career prospects and workplace relationships. During job interviews for teaching positions, I noticed that schools in predominantly white districts seemed more likely to hire lighter-skinned black teachers, while schools serving minority communities were more open to hiring teachers with my darker complexion. The pattern suggested that even in professional settings, skin tone affected perceptions of competence and suitability for different types of positions. The dating world outside of Howard University reflected broader societal colorism that privileged lighter skin and European features even within black communities. Dating apps and social interactions revealed preferences for light skin that were openly expressed through profile descriptions requesting light-skinned only or no dark-skinned women, language that was painful but at least honest about colorist biases that often operated more subtly in face-to-face interactions. The breaking point came during my cousin Kemi's wedding 2 years ago, when family members spent the entire reception commenting on how beautiful the bride looked in her white dress and how her light skin made her perfect for wedding photography. Multiple relatives made direct comparisons between Kemi's appearance and mine, suggesting that I should consider skin lightening treatments before my own eventual wedding so that my photos would turn out better and I would look more radiant in white. The psychological damage from years of family colorism had created self-doubt and internalized anti-blackness that affected every aspect of my life, from career choices to romantic relationships to basic self-care and appearance decisions. I found myself avoiding bright colors that would highlight my dark skin, choosing makeup and hairstyles that were supposed to make me look softer and less obviously African, and constantly comparing myself to lighter-skinned women who seemed to navigate the world with less resistance and more acceptance. The healing process began when I started therapy with Dr. Aisha Williams, a dark-skinned therapist who specialized in treating internalized racism and colorism within black communities. She helped me understand that the colorist attitudes in my family were symptoms of collective trauma from colonization and slavery that had taught African people to associate darkness with inferiority and lightness with value, beauty, and social acceptance. Colorism is a form of internalized oppression that divides communities that should be united against actual racism, Dr. Williams explained during one of our sessions. When families privilege light skin over dark skin, they're perpetuating the same hierarchies that were created by white supremacy to control and divide black people. Your family's treatment of you reflects their own psychological damage, not any actual deficiency in your appearance or worth. The therapy process included challenging internalized beliefs about beauty and worth that had been planted during childhood and reinforced throughout my development. I had to learn to separate my authentic self-worth from the colorist messages I had received from family and society, and to understand that their rejection of my appearance reflected their own internalized racism rather than objective reality about beauty or value. The community building that supported my healing included connecting with other dark-skinned women through organizations like Dark Girls Healing and the Melanin Goddess Movement, where I found sisterhood with women who had experienced similar family rejection and social discrimination based on skin tone. These relationships provided validation that my experiences were common rather than unique, and that healing was possible through community support and collective resistance to colorist beauty standards. The education component of my healing involved learning about African history and pre-colonial beauty standards that celebrated dark skin and African features as symbols of strength, fertility, and connection to ancestral wisdom. Understanding that colorism was a relatively recent imposition rather than a natural or universal standard helped me reclaim pride in my appearance and cultural identity that had been systematically undermined. The family confrontation that marked my emergence from colorist trauma occurred during last year's Christmas gathering, when my Aunt Ngozi again suggested that I try skin bleaching products and made disparaging comments about my stubbornness in refusing to lighten my complexion. Instead of accepting the criticism or internalizing the shame, I responded directly and clearly about how her comments were harmful, racist, and unacceptable regardless of family relationships. My dark skin is beautiful, and your inability to see that beauty reflects your own internalized racism, not any actual problem with my appearance. I told her in front of the entire family. I will not be bleaching my skin, changing my features, or apologizing for looking like our African ancestors. If you can't love and accept me as I am, then that's your limitation, not mine. The family reaction was initially shock and anger, with some relatives suggesting that I was being disrespectful and too sensitive about comments that they claimed were meant to be helpful. But my younger cousins and some family friends expressed support for my stance, and several admitted that they had also struggled with colorist pressure but had been afraid to speak up about their experiences. The professional empowerment that emerged from healing colorist trauma included developing curriculum for my elementary school students about diverse beauty standards and the importance of celebrating all skin tones within Black and brown communities. I created lessons that taught children to recognize and reject colorist messages while building pride in their authentic appearance regardless of their position on the melanin spectrum. The romantic relationship that developed during my healing process was with Marcus, a dark-skinned engineer who actively celebrated African features and rejected colorist beauty standards that privileged European-influenced appearance. Our relationship was based on mutual appreciation for each other's authentic selves rather than conformity to externally imposed standards, and it provided a model for healthy love that wasn't conditional on appearance modification or color-based hierarchies. The advocacy work that emerged from my experience includes speaking at conferences about colorism within Black communities and working with organizations that challenge internalized racism through education, therapy, and community building. I share my story to help other dark-skinned women understand that they are not alone in their experiences and that healing from colorist trauma is possible through individual work and collective action. The family relationships have evolved slowly, with some relatives becoming more conscious of their colorist language and attitudes, while others continue to prioritize light skin over dark skin in their interactions and comments. I've learned to set boundaries around colorist behavior while maintaining relationships with family members who are willing to grow and change their perspectives. Today, I work as an elementary school teacher who actively promotes diverse beauty standards and challenges colorist attitudes when they appear in classroom interactions or educational materials. I mentor young dark-skinned girls who are beginning to internalize negative messages about their appearance, helping them develop pride and confidence in their authentic selves before colorist trauma can take root and damage their self-esteem. The self-love journey has transformed my relationship with my appearance, my career, and my community involvement. I now see my dark skin as a source of strength and beauty that connects me to African ancestry and resistance traditions rather than as a disadvantage that requires compensation or modification. The healing process has been difficult but liberating, allowing me to live authentically rather than constantly seeking approval from people whose standards were based on internalized oppression. Key resources and solutions that made the difference. Dark Girls Healing and similar organizations provide support groups, education, and advocacy specifically for women dealing with colorism trauma and internalized racism within minority communities. Therapy with culturally competent providers who understand colorism helps individuals process family trauma and develop healthy self-image despite community pressure to conform to Eurocentric beauty standards. Educational programs about African history and pre-colonial beauty standards help people understand that colorism is a recent imposition rather than a natural or universal hierarchy. Community organizing efforts within minority communities work to challenge colorist attitudes through education, advocacy, and collective resistance to skin tone discrimination. Mental health resources specifically addressing internalized racism provide support for individuals and families dealing with the psychological impact of colorism and other forms of internalized oppression. Youth programs that promote diverse beauty standards help children develop positive self-image and resistance to colorist messages before trauma can take root. Advocacy organizations work on policy changes and cultural shifts that challenge colorism in media representation, employment practices, and social institutions that perpetuate skin tone discrimination. Family therapy services help relatives understand the impact of colorist attitudes and develop healthier ways of supporting all family members regardless of their appearance. Today, When I meet other dark-skinned women who are struggling with colorism in their families or communities, I tell them that their beauty is real, their worth is inherent, and their appearance requires no modification or apology. Colorism is a symptom of collective trauma that has nothing to do with actual beauty or value, and healing is possible through individual work and community support. Your dark skin is not a disadvantage to overcome. It's a source of strength and beauty that deserves celebration and pride. The people who can't see that beauty are dealing with their own internalized oppression, and their limitations don't define your worth.